Welcome back to another episode of You're Already Accepted, a community rewatch. Excuse me. I'm excited today because we have Jonathan, we have Ethan, we have Christian, and we have a special guest with us today. We have Kayla Dixon.
Hey, guys.
That's my wife.
That's Ethan's wife. Kayla is going to be joining us today. So today we are going over season 2, episodes 9 and 10, conspiracy theories and interior design, and Mixology 101. So before we get into the A+, I just wanted to say, folks, I have been listening to the last couple episodes, and it has occurred to me that I have been, first of all, talking way too fast, and then just having a bunch of little like comments.
Take your time, baby.
Slow down. So that annoys me as much as it annoys you. So I just wanted to thank my co-hosts for being gracious and not calling me out on it. But I'm also going to try to be better about it. You know, that's
forgive you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. There's going to be a soundbite of like, aw. But you know, guys, that's just what happens whenever you don't have enough attention given to you as a child. Whenever you're the middle child, that's what happens. So, who wants to do the synopsis today? Let's just have Kayla do the synopsis, like based off. No, I'm just kidding. Based off of the name, conspiracy theories, and interior design, what you think it would be. But no, go ahead, Jonathan.
Oh, okay. Conspiracy theories and interior design. People say people say that I'm not cutting this. People say that I slur my words, and honestly, I have. But I think it's because people said like, "Oh, you slur your words." I'm like, no. So
he's not drinking. We promise.
Yeah.
Etc. Etc.
No, but with conspiracy theories and interior design, we have 2 main plots. One, Abed and Troy build a pillow and blanket fort. Pretty fun, pretty good, like fun side B plot. And then
not a lot of plot to it though.
It's just kind of there.
Yeah, it's just kind of there. But then also we have the main plot, which is Jeff pretty much makes up a class to get a credit. And it turns out that the class isn't real, but he still gets the credit for it at first. But then they realize all of night school isn't real. And then we get into what's up.
I would just say that a history or conspiracy theories in American history class, being a history major, that would have been really cool to take. So I am kind of sad that it's not a real class. But yeah, it's honestly, Jeff, good for you for going the extra mile to try to fake the credit.
Yeah, it's on brand for his character
for sure.
It's pretty funny. But in terms of A+ stuff, I just love with Professor Professorson, and he's like, "Well, I used to be a student here at Greendale, but then what do you say? I faked.
I made up a class to get a credit, just like you.
Yeah,
and then I had to make up other classes for that professor, and then I had to fill those classes with students, which honestly is like, kind of makes sense in a way.
Yeah,
right. It's fitting that the theater professor would do that, right? The drama teacher would do that.
This is night school, and like it's all that like that giant room where he's just
computers.
Yeah, computers are going, and then but he's like, and more, etc. He's like, did you just mispronounce etc.? Like,
my Latin class was fake too, Jeff. Come on.
That guy, like, I remember the first time I saw that actor, he was in an episode of Law and Order SVU. And like, have you guys seen any like the memes about Law and Order SVU where it's like, John Mulaney makes the joke about this, where he's like there's a guy moving boxes, and like the side character who happens to know everything that happened with like the horrible crime. He's like, Johnny down the street, I know him. And it's like, yeah, like he played that guy in an episode of SVU.
The informant. Almost.
Well, he was also in a season 1 episode of Community,
right?
Because he's in the one where Troy and Britta
Troy makes up having trauma.
Yeah, they're in like an improv class, and Troy makes up the trauma of like he got like
See, I was wondering, like, I couldn't remember if we'd already talked about that episode or if that was coming later.
Yeah, right.
Because it's like, so does Community expect the audience to be really dumb and think that we're not going to remember that, or what?
I was thinking about that too during this, because I was like, granted that was just Troy and Britta that were in the class, but like surely they've seen him around before.
Right. I guess I didn't think about that either. That like that Troy and Britta wouldn't have known that he was doing that to.
Yeah, Annie, but you still would think that Jeff and Annie would have. You wouldn't,
right? No, I get there. I get
during
that.
the day, so kind of a plot hole, whatever. But anyway, continue.
But yeah, that final like shootout scene. Again, pretty.
Can you walk us through all the different people who get shot?
Oh gosh, can you walk us through that? Because I'm still a little confused too.
So for context, it's supposed to be sort of like the culmination of all of the conspiring that everybody does against each other, right?
And the dean's just on everybody's side, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is
I
the
don't
most.
know what I'm doing.
Would this hoodie wear a time hoodie?
Yeah.
Would
I've always said that too. Like, wore this hoodie.
Would that this
not like I wish this like. what's the name of his book? The
Dean Dangerous.
Dean
The
Dangerous.
time, word that this dice was a time dice.
Yeah.
Okay, so I actually looked that up because I was like, okay, that has to be a reference to like Dune or like H.G. Wells or something. Like, apparently, like that's just something the writers made because like a lot of the community like forums just admit that like the dean tries to sound really cool and doesn't. Like that's actually a pretty cool line. Like that's the most profound thing the dean would ever write, and he did it completely accidentally.
Yeah.
Like, but so the final shootout.
Yeah. So, I'm trying to remember. Annie. Okay. So originally, Annie and Jeff. No.
So Annie
Jeff?
shoots
Professor Berg,
Professor Sun first, aka Sean Garrity.
Yes.
Shoots him
Mhm.
because they realize that the dean is behind it. So they bring the dean in. Garrity's or Professor Sun is sitting there. Annie shoots him, fake shoots Professor Sun, and then the dean shoots Annie.
Right, to
Shoots
get
Annie.
Jeff to make Jeff think that he's
Had an actual gun.
right.
And then let's see.
Jeff shoots the dean.
Yeah.
To get at Annie.
Yes.
For
And then
being a bad
Annie's like,
friend.
"What the heck?
Yeah.
That was a
So
fake gun."
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And
she
then-
shoots Jeff. Right.
No, because then the police officer comes in.
No, she does shoot Jeff.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Because you thought Annie, you know,
Annie's got a
That
gun.
was good. That was a good like.
Yeah.
I waited all summer for you.
That's
for
believable.
months.
You're right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So she shoots Jeff to
Right,
make the
right.
dean freak out,
Yes.
and then I think
And then Garrity gets up and says, "Okay, I think we're done now."
right.
And then the security guard comes in and blows away Garrity with the shotgun.
Yeah.
They're fake guns.
And then
And then, and 100% of fake gun related accidents, the real victim is the person with the fake gun.
and scene.
Do you have breakfast plans? I do
I do
now.
now. So Sean, we're still on for Thanksgiving, right?
Just talk to your father, Craig.
Okay, and that line is really funny too
Yeah.
because the professor's like, never, if you accidentally scratch the dean's car, never say that you'll pay him back with acting because he's
Mhm.
supposed to go to the dean's Thanksgiving
Yep.
to act like the dean stole his girlfriend.
Yeah.
Which I think is we kind of get a hint of the dean's sexuality because he doesn't want to admit to his
Right,
family
he hasn't come
he's
out yet to
sexual,
them,
right? So that's very clever. I like
Mhm.
that.
Which like that that's something I love about Community because like that's a very like that could be in itself its own movie. Like like kind of like an artsy, like a insular art house, like almost bottle movie where it's like, oh, this guy who's like successful in his own right
Right.
is going to his family to tell his family about like or opened up to his family about his sexuality that he's
Right.
never done before. And like you know, and like just like they can even call it like talk to your father, right?
Right.
Like, or
But
whatever.
that would
But-
be a Kevin James rom-com where he plays a drama professor, and the whole movie is just him owing the dean or the
Yeah.
equivalent of the dean, like, oh, this is him pretending that the dean's going to save his daughter from a burning fire or something like that, you
Yeah.
know. But yeah, I definitely agree with that. That could be a whole bottle episode.
and then they make that into a joke, like just talk to your father.
Yeah.
It's so good. That's one of my favorite things with this show. Like, let's see, but yeah, really, that final shootout was just I go back to like there are a few scenes in the show I like repeatedly YouTube, like this is one of them, like Community shootout conspiracy episode.
It's up there with the paintball paintball
Yeah.
episode where Shane comes in and is, shooting, and there's so much drama.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's just, yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And like again, this is one I consistently see like really popular amongst fans. One second, I'm taking a water break.
But I do feel like if it's kind of like in the off season of football where you like start looking up football highlights, you're like, man, I could really, but it's like, man, I really need to do another rewatch of Community.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, this is one of those for me. What about y'all? What's some good stuff?
No, I mean, this is a brilliant episode. And I think the acting, especially by Joel McHale and Allison Brie and I'm blinking on the Dean's actor name, Jim Rash.
Jim Rash. Yeah.
Yes.
I
Like-
like say Craig Pelton.
Craig Pelton as Craig Pelton.
Incomparable.
Like they have really good acting in it. And like you talked about the Annie scene where she's like gonna fake shoot Jeff and she's like, Annie's got a gun now.
Yeah.
You strung me along all summer. Like
I
it's
live
kind
in
of
a bad
believable.
neighborhood, right?
Yeah, like it's I mean, we don't if you're watching this for the first time, you think she's actually telling the truth. And in a way, maybe she is kind of like
Mhm.
has like half feelings, like she
Right.
kind of is speaking from the heart. But great acting all around. I really like to, even though like the Troy and Abed plot doesn't have a lot of plot to it, it's still just a fun, like just them being innocent and like making a pillow fort and then like getting everybody involved in true community fashion. And Troy has a couple Troy and Ahmed both have a couple funny lines when they're in there, like when Annie and Jeff are chasing Professor Sun through the pillow fort, and Troy is like, you should really check out our Civil Rights Museum while you're here.
Yeah.
And then the chase scene is really cool, and they have like the Turkish district, and then like Britta. Oh, hi.
It's like the scene in 300, whenever the hunchback goes to Xerxes' tent.
And then the Latvian Independence Parade. Like they have all the proper permits, don't worry.
Yeah.
Or I think is it Leonard that's in there? And Abed's like, Leonard, you can't be here. You ordered 3 forwarding strikes against you.
Well, also something I loved about like the whole fort like idea was they went through it just enough, not too much, but like they went through the fort just enough to notice that like, or to make like have the little bit of joke in there that like they're just crawling like through the fort on their knees, like it was
but they play it completely straight though, right?
Yeah, it's a real chase scene. Yeah.
So they're just like, oh, I gotta go. They just gotta fall through.
Honestly, Community does really good chase scenes, and I feel like the showrunner saw this as like just a little like a throwaway like episode, and that's what inspired the whole like Civil War documentary.
Yeah.
Because it's too on the nose for it to be just like convenient that they did that, right?
And honestly, with that, like I want to kind of, this is something I was going to talk about later with the extra credit, but I think this is a good point. Honestly, the Blanket City looks really cool for one. Like I would love that'd be kind of fun.
Yeah.
And like there's just so many details and stuff that it's just such a community thing. But like it's so cool that they did that.
There are like traffic signs in there.
Yeah,
too.
there's like a U-turn sign. And they have like all this stuff thought of like a parade and Turkish district. And I know we have this, and then we have the fake war documentary with the pillows versus blankets or whatever fight. But I wish there was like a third one in between, kind of like we get like multiple paintball episodes, where like they make this like a yearly thing. Like, all right, it's the yearly Troy and Abed blink, kind of like the Halloween Heist in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and like kind of explore that more of like where that's the main part of the episode, and like kind of like the Meow Meow Beans, where it becomes like this society.
Yeah.
And like you have like classes and like jobs, and it slowly comes to the point where like it's actually like becoming like a recognized legal city. So like where the state's like, okay, you have to pay taxes now, and Abed and Troy are like, oh,
that's 2 adults.
We can't do that anymore. Like
there's like a criminal underground that Shirley is running.
I mean,
maybe we don't want to pay.
they could do so much with that and just have like a whole like 2-part episode where like it just goes like beyond the extreme and kind of like Meow Meow Beans, but that's just wishful thinking on my part.
I can't wait to get to Meow Meow Beans.
That's season 5 though, isn't it? It's a ways away, but it'll be worth it.
Yeah, it will be.
What you got, Christian?
This was a pretty surprising episode for me. I'd kind of forgotten about it before we covered it, but there are some good lines that come out of it. I think the first one is in the opening study room scene where Troy and Abed decide to build the blanket fort, and Britta is like kind of making fun of them for being childish, and Troy just kind of like as he's walking out like, "We'll enjoy eating fiber and watching The Mentalist." And it reminds me of whenever I was in 4th grade. Ethan was in 5th grade. We were in such a small school that we were in the same classroom, and we had this teacher who was really obsessed with NCIS, and so she was obsessed with Abby, but also Tony DiNozzo, and she would be like, "Yeah, I've got a date with a naval military investigator," but she dressed up as Abby for Halloween, and like that's definitely a midlife or like middle-aged adult thing to do is to watch a CBS crime drama
and be obsessed with it
with it, like make that your personality. Like, I'm gonna have wine tonight, and schmooze around with is Mark Harmon the old guy from NCIS? Yeah.
Not Dan Harmon.
Not
Danielle Harmon.
Yeah.
Not Don Harmon.
Yeah.
And then I think my favorite episode, my favorite scene from this episode is whenever Garrity / Wooly / Professor Sun is honestly doing a really good job of playing it off that he knows Jeff, and the dean's like, "Really, you're Professor Sun?" And the professor is like, "Well, my family name is Professor Berg, but we had to change it whenever we were fleeing the Nazis." And I was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry," right?
We quote that all the time.
We do. Ethan and I will say that all the time. And I don't know what it is about the joke. Maybe the fact that like it has such dark implications, but it's also just so like ridiculous that his last name is Professorson.
And that the dean believes that it's Professor Berg because he's trying to
like trying to be PC, right?
Yeah.
Because like there's also the layer of it of like, oh well, it's
I can't make it's a Holocaust.
Oh, I can't. I mean,
can't argue with that.
It's not racist to ask an Asian man for his qualifications as a Spanish teacher, right? I also really like. So there's about halfway through whenever Annie and Jeff are starting to investigate Professor Sin. Her diorama, which is honestly pretty
For the
impressive.
diorama-rama?
The diorama is about a brighter future. What is it? A drive to a brighter future, something like that.
So.
And so in her diorama, you have to like start the car and it like drives on the track, which is really cool that the showrunners did that.
Yeah.
But there is a part where her car gets bombed, like this little tiny, Hot Wheels car.
Right, but right before that, Jeff gets a
phone call,
yeah.
right? And like in a warp voice, like,
Tell
you better tell your
friend.
friend to stop messing around with night school.
Things
And
will
so-
get
explosive. And so Jeff tackles Annie, and you think that the whole diorama is going to explode, and then it's just like a little like firecracker inside the car, but it shows it from like 3 different parts.
Yeah.
I thought my streamer was like messing up.
No, yeah. and I love that because that's a very like mid 2000s crime movie thing to do. Of like, oh, here's this one judge who's not corrupt in the city. He's on our side. His car blows up.
Yeah.
And it shows it from 3 angles. But I like how it makes that sort of,
And they even
ridiculous.
play into the ridiculousness where
Yeah, I probably
Jeff's like, I shouldn't have tackled you, huh? Yeah.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Also, I think that my other A+, whenever Annie and Jeff are looking into night school, and it's like all the classes are just kind of like half, like history
Math
of something.
1, 2, 3.
Math 1, 2, 3, theological phys ed,
Yeah.
Studyology 101.
Yeah,
The
learning.
exclamation point. Yeah.
Yeah. And that makes me feel really like, I'm not going to use cringe as like the modern version of like, it really makes me uncomfortable because it reminds me of what I call like a big set piece dream. It feels like something that my brain would have had to do whenever I was like in middle school to make my dream feel real. So for reference, so we went to Worlds of Fun whenever I was like 7 or 8. Like we went to the haunt, or it was that time of the year. It was before the haunt, and then like a couple nights later, I remember having a dream where we were at quote unquote Worlds of Fun, but like my brain couldn't obviously, do the zoning and the architecture for all of it. So it's like, oh, well, we just have this one little kiddie car that goes around in a circle all the time. And it was like really, it was almost like liminal space, the back rooms, sort of thing. And again, I feel like in that dream, if I had a dream where I was in college again, I would get a class list that said Studyology 101 or like history of something.
Yeah.
Like, Kayla, do you ever have anything like that where you feel like your brain is trying to like work overtime, anything like that?
Yeah, sometimes I'll have dreams where I'm back in high school and I forget my locker combo or I don't know, I run into someone and I don't know who it is, but I kind of have an idea
Yeah.
who it is.
But in the context of the dream, you're like, oh yeah, it's that person.
Yeah.
But whenever you wake up, you're like, who actually
Who
was that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so crazy. But and again, it isn't really anything to do with the episode, but it unlocked that memory for me.
Well, it also reminds me of that one episode of Rick and Morty where like they put Jerry in that low simulation, and so they
it's
think,
like 5% power.
You the man, like the whole thing.
There actually is an Appley Award. Yes.
Yeah.
For leading the class, folks, who do you say was at the top of the class for the Greenness 7? I actually said it was Garrity / Wooly / Professor Sin. For the work that he put in.
He's not part of the Greendale 7 though.
He's not part of the Greendale 7.
We've kind of broken away from the original theme of this whole section, which was supposed to be the best of the Greendale 7.
Oh.
It's fine. I'll let it slide.
Oh,
But I'm good with
along
Professor Sin. Continue. Sorry.
okay. But like I said, just for having him just like take it and start like, yes, Jeff is in my class. Make sure you read chapters 12 and 13 of Donaldson, and I'll see you on Monday. And I'm like, dude, like, I wish that people would do that for me if I'm like trying to make an excuse to leave an event
Yeah.
and be like, oh yeah, Christian, come on, we're gonna leave, we're gonna go together, like, cool. Or like pretending to be somebody's girlfriend or boyfriend. That's what I always wanted to do in high school.
Yeah.
Of like a girl's like,
Hey babe, ready to go?
right, a girl's like, there's a stalker, and she's like, man, I really don't have to talk to him. I'd be like, don't worry, I'll go with you. You're pretending to be my girlfriend. I always wanted to do that, and nobody ever let me do it. So, so Professor Sin is living out the dream that I never got to do. So.
I would just put it in Annie just because like she's the reason the investigation starts. I mean, again, she does a lot of great work in this. Yeah, really. That's
I agree.
Like, yeah,
I got Annie too. Just the acting is great, and like I said, that speech before she fake shoots Jeff kind of feels genuine in terms of the character herself. But yeah,
for extra credit, let's see. I guess we already talked about the dean, like dealing with the sexuality of this man. Just talk to your father. That's so good.
What if the post-credits sequence was him actually showing up to Thanksgiving, which would kind of mess with the timeline, but he literally just brings a Dalmatian in on a leash,
Yeah.
and then like he's like, this speaks for itself, and then just leaves.
I also had like, so again, this is just something as we rewatch. Like Leonard's such a dirtbag. Like he stole his son's blankets, and like he's
You're
looting
missing the
from
point by
people after-
idolizing him.
What'd you say?
You're missing the point by idolizing him.
Yeah. So yeah, there's that. And then Pavel, like the side character, always reminds me of Dr. Pavel from Dark Knight Rises. Which I have some interest. Okay, we can return to a Dark Knight podcast real fast. But I was thinking about this the other day because I watched a video of Conor McGregor like doing a Bane impression. I'm like, that movie came out 9 years ago. That series started 17 years ago. It's so weird that like that the Nolan trilogy still has so much like cultural legs that like 9 years later, someone's like, "You think darkness is your ally?" Like,
And Conor McGregor did the impression.
yeah, like he posted on Twitter. Something
Did he do
like
it
that.
well?
No, it was
Yeah.
He was like like, "You think darkness is your ally?" Really, adopted the dark. I was born in like it was too Irish.
That one's kind of gotten too memed though. Dark Knight Rises. It's become more like
Yeah.
the meme film of the trilogy, and nobody even remembers Batman Begins. So it's just
Mhm.
like, it's really just the Dark Knight, and then the third one's kind of like gets memed because it sucks, honestly.
You don't like Dark Knight Rises at all?
Oh no, it blows.
Man, I see. I still really I like all three. Like I goes Dark Knight, Batman Begins, Dark Knight Rises, but
Yeah, we're gonna go fight the guys with machine guns and tanks with our handguns and batons. It's gonna be a fair fight.
And let's send all the policemen into the sewers at once. And let's not even show Batman for half the movie. He's
Yeah.
just trying to climb out of a hole. Like,
That's where the trilogy went in the hole, if you know what I'm saying.
anyway,
I guess I hadn't thought about that though. That Pavel, like the Polish student at Greendale, I think I love the fact that he has his shirt buttoned up all the way to the top.
what's up, guy?
we've seen him before too, right? He was in another episode,
I feel
I
like
think.
he was.
Yeah.
Yeah. We see him a couple times after this, if we haven't already.
Yeah, this is the first mention of Fat Neil.
Yeah,
Which I think in the next episode he actually appears too. First
Mhm.
time that they mention him though. And then I just like that weird look at the very end whenever Jeff and the group are like talking like afterwards about what happened, and Jeff says that Annie was really good at going off script, and Britta kind of gives him like a weird look when he says that, and I wasn't sure why she would. I thought it was just maybe like a throwaway like thing, but I looked it up, and I guess it's a reference because obviously later on in the season we get the reveal that Jeff and Britta are
Still
having
hooking
like
up.
a secret relationship. So that's what the look was for, where she was kind of like, "Oh, what do you mean by going off script?"
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was a nice little
Huh.
kind of Easter egg. So
Yeah. I was wondering about that. So
Yeah, I already threw my extra credit in, as I just think that the would that this hoodie were a time hoodie, like
the way he says it,
right, exactly. But even whenever Garrity says like, would that this desk were a time desk,
yeah,
it sounds so profound and like something that, you know, a 15-year-old chemistry student would have like as his Instagram bio because he thinks that he's really smart and like, you know, he idolizes Neil deGrasse Tyson. He'd be like, yeah, my favorite book is The Martian, and I also love Dean Dangerous by Craig Pelton. You know, like I feel like would that this blank were a time blank would be like his cover photo on Facebook or something like that.
or like one of his stickers on his like college.
right.
yeah. So on that real quick, sorry, did you guys catch the line where Jeff says something about after the dean walks away and says I have to go write my book or whatever, and Jeff's like, that's going to be the worst book that I ever read cover to cover.
Right.
Why is he going to read the book?
Because it's so bad. He's like, oh, it's like watching a movie off of this TV or
Yeah, but I can't
watching
believe
Mystery
Jeff would
Science-
say that. Doesn't sound like something he would say.
Oh, you
Like,
think
why
like
would
maybe
he? Unless he's
Troy
being
would say it?
sarcastic. Why would Jeff read the book?
Because it's so bad. That's the only
Maybe.
reason. Like,
But Jeff
I
doesn't
think
seem like a
that's-
reader to me.
right.
No, I agree. I think,
And he kind of hates the dean, or not doesn't hate the dean, but he kind of already doesn't like the dean anyway. So
Right.
it's just
Yeah.
like, I don't know.
But he's not reading it to support the dean. He's reading it to make fun of. The
I know.
dean.
I
Right.
get the
and I get what you're
background.
saying,
It just
too.
doesn't feel like a very Jeff. it
Maybe
doesn't work for
if
Jeff.
Britta or Troy said it, that'd make more sense.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Or like,
That's fair.
oh man, it's so bad. I actually kind of want. If they would have,
yeah.
I don't know.
Did you have any marked in red? Anything you didn't like about the episode? It sounds like, I mean, for the most part, we like it.
I do have one thing that the one scene I didn't like was the speech about blowing everything off that Annie gives to Jeff in the hallway, and then she like what if I blow off walking? What if I blow off standing? And she like falls on the floor, and then she's like, what if I blow off talking? Blah,
Yeah,
blah,
yeah,
blah,
yeah,
blah. It's
yeah.
that's so cringy.
Yeah.
That whole scene, it just like doesn't make any sense with the rest of the episode, and it is a little creepy in that it kind of felt like they were maybe trying to like sexualize her a little bit.
because like she's like writhing around on the ground.
kind of or like the schoolgirl, you know, like because then there's the joke in the Christmas episode wherever she's like the she dresses up in like the sexy schoolgirl
Oh, yeah.
and sings to Jeff in like the Christmas one, and so they kind of make jokes about that throughout the show. Where like Annie's young, she's kind of got like, oh, she's the schoolgirl, like she's
Right.
still kind of immature, and how some
Yeah.
guys apparently, or I don't know, whatever.
I
It's just kind of cringy.
I remember that scene being in a lot later episode. Like I remember that, but I feel like it was one of like season 4 episodes or something like
But
that.
it gets quoted a lot in the best of community YouTube ones, but it's
Yeah.
not that funny to me.
Yeah,
No, I agree. Yeah,
it's kind of cringy. I
Yeah.
agree.
It doesn't fit the show really.
New Girl will definitely do that, but
no, my goodness. New Girl's not that bad. We're not going to fight.
You're right. You're right. So, and I also will say, I did make amends with the person that introduced me to the show, which is kind of why I didn't like the show. So I'm willing to give it another go. So I will say that. I will say that. But Call Me Cat, no. Call Me Cat is definitely out.
yeah, I think that can burn to the ground for sure.
But in terms of rating, I mean, I think I'd give this like an 8.5 out of 10. It's a funny episode. It's one of those that when you watch it, you kind of forget how enjoyable it is.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like the final scene with like all the conspiracies and the shootout always kind of gets me again. There's always just like, oh yeah, I forgot that they were all like conspiring against each other. But even like the blanket fort, I wish they would maybe do a little bit more with the blanket fort. But honestly, it also ties into like the chase scene, so that kind of makes up for it. It's an enjoyable episode. It's not my favorite, but it's up there. It's a fun one to watch and very rewatchable in my mind.
Yeah, I think you got me like. Because we're just talking about that Annie scene that you mentioned, with like she's like, blah, like, it sounds like a alien from Rick and Morty, like,
Oh, that means please have sex.
yeah, that's why I was looking at
Please sleep with me. Moopy doop and a moopy doop at the same party.
But like, I got me thinking about the idea of like how you fill your episode. Like, so we take 30 seconds to watch, Annie. Oh, what if I don't do anything? Like we take 30 seconds, like, to do that instead of adding it to the investigation or the like pillow fort, like two elements in the episode that were working so well. And like, I just think about that like throughout this episode, like, there's 5 seconds here, there's 7 seconds here. We're like, oh, that like
kind of wasted it.
Exactly. Just kind of like, so that's kind of my thing. I think this. Oh, go ahead.
I can say, I feel like you told me this one time, but isn't there like a number of like, for a successful sitcom, there needs to be a joke that lands every so many seconds, and like Community hits that really well. Like, because you don't want to go
that. I don't know what the number is.
Yeah, right. Like, I feel like I've heard that.
It's like every 10 seconds or something.
Every
like
10 seconds that you don't want to have a joke too quickly, because then it just feels like you're rapid firing, but you also don't want to go too long, because then you lose the audiences. And I feel like this episode, it's too long between good jokes. Like, there is that filler. Yeah, I agree with that.
Sure. And so like, that's how I feel like with this episode. Hilarious concept. I think the idea of Jeff faking classes, having a fake professor, not having night classes, all that, hilarious. The blanket fort, hilarious. But in terms of actuality, how much did I really laugh? I didn't really laugh that much. It was enjoyable, but I just, it didn't really get me laughing that much. So I'd probably say, but again, this is a top tier, like A tier Community episode for me. So 9 out of 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
I agree. I feel like this episode is a lot longer than 20 minutes. Like, it just feels to stretch out between the start of the episode with Jeff not getting credit for history, and then the end of the point. And it doesn't feel like it's a fulfilling long episode either. I feel like, because I watched this, I've seen it a couple times, obviously, like on my own, and then I watched it twice before we did this episode. And it felt like both times that I watched it that I was just missing something at every point. Like, a lot of times if I'm just like watching a show, like I'll be playing Xbox and I'll just have the show on my laptop in the background because I've already seen it. And it felt like whenever I was watching it that was going on. Like, I got to the end, I was like, I feel like I'm missing something. Like, it didn't land the way that a Community episode should. But it was still a great premise. It was a lot of fun concepts that the show handled really well. And I think it did an effective job at what it was dealt with. So, this episode is about conspiracy theories. That's the name of the title. So if I had to give this a rating, I would give it a lizard people in the deep state out of fake moon landing. So, one of the better conspiracy theories, but it's nowhere near, the absolute best on that. So,
is the moon landing fake though? Like, great question.
They hired Stanley Kubrick to do it, and he was such a perfectionist that they made them shoot on location.
I've heard that from the type of people who would idolize the "would this hoodie wear a time" hoodie.
Yeah,
that's the same type of person who would say that. So, Kayla, do you have a rating for this episode? Did you watch the episode?
I actually did not watch the episode. I do like the show. I don't watch it as often as he does.
Fair.
But
So what would you rate the episode based off of what we talked about it?
Sounds kind of interesting, but I know what Jonathan's saying, like not laughing that often. I don't want to watch a show if I'm not going to laugh. So I probably would not rate it very well, even though it's fun to think about conspiracy theories. It sounds like there were just some weird parts, and the Annie scene sounds like it was kind of weird. And they could have used that time for somewhere else, it sounds like. So I'd give it a 7 out of 10
Fair.
for not seeing it.
She gives it a 7 for not seeing it because a 70. Okay,
Yeah.
the joke's over. Joke's over. I'm canceling the
What a
joke.
teacher.
Cut that.
Gosh.
Teacher, I hardly. So oh gosh.
Moving on.
Stick and move. So Mixology 101 is episode 10. And this episode, Troy is turning 21. He
he's about to turn. He thinks he's turning 20.
right, because his mom told him that
Everybody's 10 for 2 years, and fifth grade tried for everybody. Oh no!
how many lives have I been living? But that's really the main plot, is that this is one of those few episodes where the whole Greendale 7 is at this in the same plot.
Mhm.
So they want to take him out for his birthday to give him his first legal drink. Britta and Jeff both want to take him to their favorite bars. Britta wants to go to the Red Door because it's a hipstery dive. Jeff wants to go to L Street because that's where he goes. It's, sort of underground and pristine. Annie is 19 in the show. Allison Brie was a lot older than that. But so she has to use it.
I was looking up her age. She's 40.
Yeah.
Pretty much. I'm like, dang.
Which I guess that's
yeah.
why it doesn't really bother me in the show with Jeff and Annie, because I kind of forget that she's supposed to be 19,
yeah.
right? So if they would have gotten like Taylor Joy, is that her name?
Anya Taylor-Joy.
Yeah.
She would have been like 12 when this came out. Though, she's not that old now.
but like
Yeah.
if that was the equivalent of like she's 19 or she, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Somebody who was actually close to that age, that would be weird.
Mhm.
But in this episode, she needs a fake ID to get into the bar. Abed is just along for the ride, honestly. Like he's just kind of there. At the bar, he is happy to talk about the Last
What's the
Starfighter.
show? Yeah, Last Starfighter.
But a gay man's hitting on him.
I thought it's Farscape.
It is
Farscape,
Farscape, right?
okay, yeah,
But he
yeah.
quotes the Last
Yeah,
Starfighter.
yeah.
Pierce just he doesn't even get to be in the episode. He just gets
Yeah.
stuck at the door.
Yeah.
So you could tell that Chevy Chase and Dan Harmon were probably clashing whenever that episode came out. It's like, you know what, Chevy, screw you, get it, yeah. And then Shirley, this is actually really sad. Shirley spends the whole episode going around the bar that they go to, which is the ballroom, because they put photos of all the really drunk people on the walls, and she's actually in them. And the episode doesn't tell you like what part of her life, but I think that it's implying that after Andre left her, she like hit rock
It looks
bottom.
recent.
Right.
Yeah.
And so she spends the whole episode like trying to take the pictures so people won't see them.
Mhm. And then they end up finding them anyways.
Right. And they end up finding them anyways.
Yeah. Kind of a sad end of the episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this episode, I'm going to say it. I think we're all pretty in agreement of like how we feel about the episode. I really appreciate like the heavy lifting that it does for me personally, like of being somebody who's 22 and like trying to and going through that stage of life recently. But in terms of like my A plus, I like the sort of the play on bar names of like, it's either an ironically gross name or a fancy one. Oh, the ballroom,
Yeah.
right? On the count of 3, name the most unoffensive bar that you've ever been. 1, 2, 3. Flanagan's Hole. Okay, we're gonna go. Then also, I pointed out that and at the end of the episode, Troy is driving Jeff's car home because everybody else is drunk and Troy didn't actually get a drink. Joel McHale's acting drunk, but we've already seen Jeff acting drunk in season 1. So that means that Joel McHale is a good actor because he's acting drunk as Jeff, but that means he's also good at acting bad drunk. Does that make sense? Because in that episode, I think it's the season finale, he pretends to fake drunk calls Britta.
It's not the finale. It's like right before that.
Okay,
though.
right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it's intentionally bad. But here, it's actually believable drunk acting. So that means that Joel McHale is a great actor because he can act well at acting badly, which I thought was really cool. I also just like that in that same scene, Jeff and Britta are making out. Ethan, you refer to the fact that they're kind of like secretly hooking up, and they're doing it right in front of Abed, and they're like bumping into him, and you're just kind of like looking over, like, stop it. And then whenever Troy gets back in the car, it's just completely silent, and Abed's like, Britta and Jeff are making out. What? I'm not a coat rack. I'm not a coat rack. And then Troy's like, Abed, no one likes a tattletale. And I don't know. I like how that encapsulates all 4 of those characters. That Troy is like, oh, he's a man now, and Abed is just, he's still a person, even though people don't treat him like one.
Mm-hmm.
And then Britta and Jeff, they're supposed to be the fancy hipsters doing all that. So
Yeah.
those are my A+ scenes.
I liked. Or I guess I have a question. Who do you think had the worst night of like our Greendale 7? So we have, I guess Jeff and Britta kind of do the same thing. They argue the whole night over like
The same bar.
over the same bar.
Well, and over like what's a good drink? That's you don't order that. Don't order 7-7. That's a girly drink or whatever. I guess they agree on that too. But yeah,
Troy, he like doesn't really get to I guess he doesn't really get to feel like part of like being an adult with like Jeff and Britta, because like everything like he thinks like, oh yeah, they're like, no, contradict that, like, oh, I should do this, no, you're wrong, this like,
well, he thinks that they know everything about being an adult.
Yes.
And that's what the kind of the theme of the episode is really. They don't know anything more than he does. You know, it's
and so yes, he has to take everyone home at the end. Ava gets hit on by a gay man and then gets
a drink thrown in his face.
gets drink thrown in his face. And
I do want to cut in right there. Screw Robert. That's the guy's name. Screw Robert. Not because he's gay, because he's the typical nice guy, but like in the not like you typically think of that as like a heterosexual thing. Like he's hitting on Abed. And then whenever Abed says no, he's like, all right, you stupid bee. You know, fine, get out of my life. He throws the drink in Abed's face. Like, what the heck? That's awful.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be, he doesn't really realize that Abed's lacking, you know, lacking in social cues.
Right.
I don't think that he realized that.
But still, like, I don't feel like in a normal setting, you would do that to somebody. You know what I mean? And it's played off as a laugh, but like that's actually a really terrible thing to do. Is like, oh well, he didn't accept your advance, so you're gonna like throw your drink on him. Like
it was funny. Like a little part of like their whole back and forth when he was like, maybe we should wormhole this conversation to a different place. Like, and I was like, wormhole's different than teleportation. He's like, just trying to explain that to you the whole time. Like,
yeah.
I was like
you idiots.
Oh gosh. Yeah. So for me, I guess there's
Shirley
Annie,
with the pictures.
Yeah,
Annie?
Shirley and Pierce. They like, which that's another thing with the Shirley like part of it. Like they don't really like healthily resolve that in the
right.
episode.
That bugs me.
Okay. Also, that was my other screw. Screw the Greendale 7 for not being supportive of her.
Yeah.
Because they're just like, did you forget some photos, Shirley? And granted, Britta's drunk at the time, but I'm like, no, like. You've got to realize that like this is a dark part of her life, and you've got to realize that like she feels horrible about it. And you're right; it doesn't ever get resolved. I thought like at the end of the episode, like Troy would like before taking everybody home, they stop at Shirley's place. Like I just figured, because thinking of this show, they usually kind of bring things around like at least the community itself they're gonna treat each other well and like, fix it. But like there's no fixing it. They don't go back to it. She and Pierce have a good. Where Pierce finally says, "Thank you, Shirley. You're welcome."
Because he's too proud to ask for help,
right?
And stuff.
Yeah, and he gets stuck in the door.
But yeah, that would have been, especially because we're already seeing at the end, like the theme is that, or the points that Troy's become a man. He's, he goes and tells Annie that he thinks she's, he's a good friend to Annie and supports her, and then whatever. So you're having that with Shirley too, where maybe Troy goes by and just says, "Hey, sorry about earlier," whatever, and they have a nice moment. Would go a lot farther and just wrapping it up and like, hey, Troy is a lot more mature than people realize. And
right.
I agree. I think that was a kind of one of my biggest pet peeves with this episode is like the lack of resolve for that. Yeah. Because they spend this whole time like basically making fun of Shirley for having a drunk,
right?
A drinking addiction. Well, I don't know if it's addiction, but whatever.
Right. It's mostly played off for jokes.
And then she just leaves and gets mad and like they never talk about it again.
Yeah.
Like, why does Shirley get to be? Why is she always
the punching bag?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's a joke of like the bouncer's like, hey, Shirley, welcome back. And she does like the cartoonish thing of grabs him by the shirt, like, you don't know me, okay? And like, again, that's played off as laughs, I feel like there could have been an actual emotional beat of like, oh, like Shirley didn't want to come tonight because she has a tie to that. Did you do your A+ already?
No, I think we were just talking about who had the worst night. Because we haven't talked about Annie yet too. So Annie is pretending to be Caroline Decker from Corpus Christi.
Corpus Christi.
78418 or
and so her struggle with is that she's realizing that because she pretends like she's Caroline and that she has a friend named Annie, so she's talking, oh, Annie has everything planned out and she always wants to do all this, and she's like slowly realizing that her actual personality is she thinks she has everything planned out. And right, is that kind of where I'm missing something with that?
That's like the struggle.
She realizes that she's not like as spontaneous as she could be.
Yep, that's right. So worst night, I mean, I think Shirley's just because she doesn't get any resolve, really, and everybody's kind of douchey to her. But I'd say Pierce probably has a pretty rough night too because he he literally just sits there like nobody else
comes
helps
into the
him.
bar, right? Like,
yeah, I
he's-
guess he says he doesn't want help, but
right.
like why then? Surely I don't know. So
I'm about to say he's almost wide enough to completely block the door. So
Yeah.
that's the other part about him. Like, if nobody enters or leaves, like just let him and that security guard like look at each other.
Yeah, and the bouncers still there whenever. Yeah,
Yeah.
So it must have been a really awkward conversation. And it's kind of a weird. Okay, because at the start of the episode, he just like cuts into the cake and like messes it up. Is that supposed to be like the start of his beat for the episode of like he needs to ask for help but he won't?
Probably. That's a good point. I didn't.
yeah, I think that's what the point is. It's just kind of a weird like.
It's like
why
a-
can't he cut cake?
Right. It's
So I look at
implied.
that more of just like, oh, Pierce is just kind of a weird guy who doesn't really have any
Right.
awareness, but it's also supposed to kind of hint at like he's not able to do all this stuff.
Yeah.
That's kind of a weird action for them to show.
To go with.
But I guess at the same time, he's in a wheelchair. Like there's only so much you can do
with-
without like making fun of disabilities. you know?
Right.
So,
Right.
do you have any other A+, Jonathan?
Just a brief line from Jeff and Britta. There was Shirley didn't want to go to the ballroom. She said that to
To Britta.
to Britta, who relayed that to Jeff, and Jeff was like, "What? Because they don't have plastic menus and milkshakes." And then Britta goes, "What? Because they don't have plastic menus." And then Jeff stops her, stops her
repeat that.
and says, "Don't repeat that, you goon." I just thought like that was just to use goon. It was just appreciated.
I do like the Jeff and Britta banter.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
I mean, it's supposed to be annoying at the end, but it's kind
Right.
of fun.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it's in good taste towards like that type of person who always has to have like, oh, I know a place, and like, oh, I
Yeah.
have the best.
And they're not
place.
really bickering in the episode. Like in season 1, remember that was one of the plot points. It's like, why don't you guys just sleep together already so you can stop
Right.
arguing? And this one, it's more of like fun arguing between friends, or like,
Mhm.
no, Budweiser's not the best. Kind of more like they're not actually
Right.
mad at each other. It's
Chevy's better than Ford.
Yeah.
John Deere's better than International Harvester.
At least better than Dodge. Oh, what's he
the
say?
GMC guys in the back, like, hey,
Yeah. What's he say there? He's like, ugh, she's a hurricane. And Troy's like, yeah. It's like,
Hurricanes are bad.
Troy.
Yeah.
ironic
That's
because
also kind of fun because it kind of hints at Troy and Britta, in the
thought
future.
that too. Yeah, the only other like A+ things that I had we haven't already talked about. There weren't that many because this episode blows. Let's face it. I do like
Okay,
the
so
very
we're not in
beginning
agreement.
whenever they're like to you, and then Pierce is like, "How come we only sing the last 2 words? That was weird." That's kind of I don't know why that's funny, but it was. And then the cake wording, whenever they read off the cake wording always cracks me up too because I can't remember what it says, but it's like happy day on which you were expelled from my uterus or something,
Right.
or that coincide. No, it says dessert that coincides with the day you were
The day and year that
you were
coincides. Yeah,
Guys,
I never cry.
Leading the
it's-
class.
I was just gonna say it's kind of funny that Pierce is the one who points out that it's a meta. Like, well, how come we only sing the last 2 words? Because he's also the one who, in season 1, whenever Britta had the friend that was a lesbian, like he pulls out the letter to her about like, oh, I've been preparing words for this exact occasion, and whenever he starts, that's when the theme song kicks in. So it's just kind of a fun. It's probably not intentional, but like he's the person.
It's a
who's-
little meta, yeah.
yeah, playing with the time frame of the episode of like
Mhm.
you expect that I'm going to explain the joke now. You expect that they sang the song before the episode cut in, but that's literally when the episode starts is that they start singing those 2 words. So, for leading the class, Jonathan, who did you have? I think we also had the same person, but
yeah, we just did Troy. I mean, with this, I was kind of thinking like in terms of the whole arc of the season, this episode as well as the Halloween episode, where like both in both of those situations, Troy's saving the day for the group, and so when at the end of the season, where him and Jeff are like fighting over who's going to be the leader of the group, I think like Troy, he's captain of the football team,
right,
he's like
captain of the Herbs and Space Experience as well.
yeah, exactly. He stepped up in these situations, so like he has a little more. He's a man now, right? So it's like he has a little more confidence to like believe in himself that he could be the leader, and so like that conflict in that episode has a little more payout there. So
I hadn't put that together, but that is a good point.
Yeah, I also have Troy. I just think his alcohol makes people sad. Like that quote is, I mean, I drink. It's not like I'm against alcohol, but it's just it kind of hits like, man, that's kind of some truth to it. And I like his speech to Annie too. It was very wholesome at the end when he's, I can't remember what exactly he tells her, but he's just basically trying to, make her
Build her up.
even though she's not spontaneous is what she's worried about is, he calls her a good friend, I think, and just how she's caring and stuff. Very wholesome end to the episode that otherwise isn't that funny.
I'm going to launch my lead in the class into my sort of my extra credits and some extra thoughts on the class. I said Troy as well because I see a lot of myself in him. Because the episode is him like, oh, I'm not, I don't feel like I'm entitled to be an adult now or until I'm 21. And so he spends the whole episode like listening to Britta and Jeff about like the rules of life. And he's like, well, I always thought that plastic milkshake or plastic menus were good because otherwise you spill stuff on it and your mom tells you you're ruining Fuddruckers for everyone. And he's always, like, okay, so I got to make sure that I don't have my bourbon with ice. I got to make sure I don't order a 7 and 7. Like I wish somebody would have told me the rules. And like, dude, I resonate with that hard. I compare it to being in grade school and you're in art class and the teacher is telling you the instructions for the project and like you're paying attention, right? You're listening, but you don't really know what exactly that's going to be in practice. And then suddenly the teacher's like, okay, go for it. And you're just sitting there of like, oh, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. Like there's got to be a right way and a wrong way to do it.
I agree. I think that is for every stage of life. Like graduating from college is like, now what do I do? I'm an adult. How do I do this? And getting married and getting a house, it's like you feel like everybody else knows what they're doing. And you look around and you think everybody's like pros at everything, but they're really not.
Yeah, like
We're
where's the
all
rule book?
confused.
Where's like where are all these guidelines coming from?
Exactly. And that's how I feel like I'm in second grade where it's like, oh, well, okay, well, Jonathan's got his scissors out and he's cutting the construction paper. Ethan's getting his crayons out. So like, I guess that's what I should be doing now. But I don't have like a critic who's going to be right there next to me like, okay, Christian, like get this crap together. Like, no, plastic menus are bad. Right. And so, I think I agree with Ethan that this episode isn't necessarily funny, but it's got a special place to me because I do resonate with like that, especially when it comes to like drinking and alcohol and like going to the bar in particular. Like I used to be completely against alcohol. Like whenever I was in high school, I was, the kind of guy is like, I'm a Christian and I don't go and drink like those people do. So I'm better than them. And I think even too, like whenever I was in college, I didn't think I was going to drink when I turned 21, but then like it kind of got slowly introduced to it. Ethan and Kayla actually sort of like brought me along or like, okay, like you can take your time, like
take your time,
right? You don't have to go off the deep end. But then I realized like, okay, like there's this sort of like this rite of passage that happens whenever you turn 21. It's just another birthday. Honestly, it's whenever the government decides that you can have alcohol, but that's what Troy is going through. And then he slowly realizes like, oh, like Kayla said, nobody really has it figured out. You just you like associate that status with Britta and Jeff because they're the ones who are like telling you like, don't order a 7 and 7. You've already had beer, go to L Street. And I honestly can't blame Jeff and Britta for that either. Like in the episode, it's funny, it's played for laughs, but like you always want to be that person who's in the know, like
for sure. Yeah.
I'm going on a date later today at the time of this recording. And I was telling Jonathan where I'm going. And he was like, oh, Messengers. Yeah, I've heard of that. And I'm like, see, I didn't know that existed. And I wish that I knew restaurants and coffee shops and things to go do. But I also like when people come to me and ask like, oh, hey, what office software do you use? Do you use Google Docs? How do you save save something as a PDF? And I'm like, oh yeah, come here. I can show you to do that. Like
bring your arm around them. Yeah.
Let me tell you something here about the PDF format on Google
Sonny
Drive.
boy.
Yeah.
Right. And I feel like that really speaks to the, the power trip that you go on whenever like you're in the know and you have something to offer people. So I appreciate that episode kind of draws that from me, for sure.
And I mean, Britta and Jeff they're not trying to show necessarily. I don't think they're trying to like brag or anything. They're trying to help. Like they want Troy to have a good time on his birthday,
but like from
hey, Troy,
their perspective,
right. Yeah, from their perspective. Hey, Troy, it's your birthday. This is what you need to do. But they are doing it with the best intentions. They just go about it to the point where I think they're misleading. Troy's misled and thinks, oh, these guys know what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And he finds out none of us really know what we're talking about. None of us really know what we're doing.
I feel like it feels good to be the person who knows stuff.
Mm.
People always like to feel like, oh, I'm an expert at this. Like, yeah, come to me for this advice. Let me help you. It feels good for us to help people and to like be that savior sometimes. And I don't know. I think that's just a human thing all around.
And I feel like too, it's kind of the slippery slope of like, okay, do Britta and Jeff want what's best for Troy, or do they want Troy to do what they think is best for him?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right? Like, oh, Jonathan, you're wearing a Royals hat. I think you'd look better in a blue Royals hat, even though you're wearing a white Royals hat. So I'm going to give this to you versus like, oh, I just want Jonathan to wear what he wants to wear. Right? That's a weird example, but it was
No, I follow you though.
Off the top of my head, no pun intended, right?
It's actually a metaphor about homosexuality. I want you to wear the hat that you feel like you born into.
Right? It's not a face.
Yeah. Go
No-
Royals.
No
Right.
comment. No comment. Yeah.
Go Royals. I mean, you're the AL Central. Your worst team in baseball.
Yeah.
The metaphor gets lost in translation, right?
Bring back Dayton Moore. Come on.
Which, and I know that from the point of this podcast, that's not really trivia, and I know we like to do trivia stuff, but those are my thoughts. That's not really tied to the episode, but that's what it evokes from me. But do you guys have any like other thoughts or trivia? Or
Jonathan, do you actually have any trivia?
Let's see. Let's see. Oh, the zip code that Annie says for Corpus Christi is actually one of the zip codes, like for Corpus Christi.
Corpus Christi.
Texas. Yeah.
Body
Corpus Christi,
Christ.
Texas. 78418.
Yeah, I don't know if you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rep
Rep the 418. Yeah.
Hold it down, bro.
Did you guys realize that the waitress at the bar is in the office? She's I don't know. She's kind of like a background character. But it's the episode where Andy gets beat up in the parking lot by the kids, and then I think the lady is like the mom of one of the kids, like the little girl,
Mhm.
and then it's the same girl that like makes fun of Pam. Is like, oh, when are you having your baby or something like that, and she like calls her fat. And then Pam's like, when are you having your kid next year or something like that? You remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know
Yeah.
the episode.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny how NBC and Fox and CBS all have the same like rotation of actors that you see on
Mhm.
every episode. Yeah.
Yeah.
she's-
And she looks familiar. I don't know if it's just from that I know her, or if she's been in other stuff, but
Right.
she kind of has like a face, like she's kind of different, not different looking in like a
she
bad
doesn't
way.
look like an A-list actor. She
Right.
looks like an
She has a very
everyman.
unique appearance. They're like, oh yes, she was the waitress in the bar.
Mhm.
You know, you can recognize her. But
Yeah, that makes
in
sense.
terms of final thoughts, I mean, we've talked about it already. It's a fine episode. It's boring to me. I didn't laugh. It's kind of boring, but there is the good lesson at the end, or some good wholesomeness, I guess, and to it. And like you mentioned earlier, we get to see really all 7 together at once, minus Pierce, who's in the entryway to the bar the whole time, and I guess Shirley's not really in it that much. But I mean, it does show a lot of the good like dynamic of
Yeah.
the group, where you're seeing, you know, Jeff and Brett arguing. They think they know everything, and they're trying to take Troy under their wing, so to speak. And it's fine. It's just not that funny. I give it like a 6.5 out of 10. Again, Shirley's plot not getting really any kind of ending really kind of bugged me. I was like, they could have spent like another 20 seconds on that and wrapped it up, but they just, I don't know if they didn't know how to resolve that or what, but
Yeah.
Right.
disappointing to me.
Maybe there's a scene where she's like walking to her car and there's there's some like bar pagers like, hey, Shirley, I just wanted to say, like, I'm really glad that you picked yourself up. Like, I missed seeing you around the bar, but it's good to see that you're taking care of yourself. And
Yeah.
like something as small as that.
Well, even like in the next episode we get, I think it's the next one where we find out that she and Andre are back together.
2 episodes.
Two
But
episodes.
yeah.
So this would have been honestly like, if they could have added like another 2-minute scene, like have Andre show back up and like, hey, Shirley.
Yeah.
And so you kind of get that hint of like, okay, that's why she was going to the bar.
Right.
She was in a really rough spot where her husband left her.
Mhm.
I don't know.
It's a good
Yeah.
point. Yeah.
I gave it a 5 out of 10. Similar idea.
Some blues. I was in a bad mood when I wrote it, so
I'm usually in a bad mood when I watch. Like, I don't know why. Whatever.
So I wanted to give this a 6 out of 10, but I was in a bad mood. So
but you guys talked me out of it, so I'm gonna go to 5.
but yeah, this is just a very like kind of episode to me. Very passable. Yeah, again, nothing very funny for me. Kind of just frustrating to watch. Not a big fan.
especially after a good stretch of episodes that we've
Yeah.
had after, you
Agreed.
had to have a bad one eventually. But
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna go a little bit different because again, I like to be the guy who thinks he's profound and has an insight to everything. The episode wasn't stellar, but I do feel like there are some good points that you can pull from each character and sort of like what they're dealing with. So, like I said, that rite of passage of turning 21 and like just you can't know what you don't know. So needing somebody to tell you that for Troy. But then like Annie and Abed both have like different approaches to the same issue, which is like, do I need to change who I am and my personality and the way that I act to be accepted by others? Because like Abed, he's just unapologetically talking about whatever he does, and he gets rejected he rejects Robert, and that kind of ends badly. But then Annie is like, I'm playing up Caroline Decker as this like, roadie who, is spontaneous and lives on the edge, but maybe I should actually be Caroline because who Annie is just sort of, not who I want to be. We already talked about, or kind of Kayla mentioned, like it feels good to help people, but it's also a power trip if you do it for your own self, which is Jeff and Britta. But then even Shirley has, that feeling. I think it's frustrating to not have people understand the hard times that you're going through, because there's never an excuse for like whenever you mistreat people or whenever you like snap at them. Because Shirley does, like she's like, give it to me, like give me the photos. But like if people aren't willing to kind of like meet you where you're at, like if you've been going through like a hard stretch, like it's frustrating. Like when you can't have somebody give you a little bit of grace towards that. So I feel like for this episode, Troy's birthday, happy birthday, Troy. I'm going to give it a 15th birthday, getting your driver's permit out of driver's license at 16.
Yeah.
Because think about like, what are the birthdays that everybody looks forward to the most? 21, 16, 18, maybe even. And 15 is where like you have a lot more freedom because you can go drive. But it's not like nobody's ever excited to turn 15 besides just getting their permit. So it's not an all-time episode, but it's still got some merit. So I'm going to give it a 15th birthday out of 21 birthday. So